Thank you very much, Benga. Those were the headline stories on the African continent. And talking about the major stories in Africa, this is Report Desk Africa, where we dissect major stories in Africa and talk about it, probably give possible recommendations to the stories. And today we'll be looking at some of the major events that have unfolded during the week. And of course, we'll be starting with the aftermath of the ECOWAS sanction on Mali. Also, we'll be looking at Uganda school reopening after the longest lockdown, that's 2 years. And finally, we'll be wrapping up with the ongoing World Youth Forum in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh, where we have our own correspondent, Bernard Akede, there. All right, don't go anywhere. This is Report Desk Africa. We'll be right back.
Welcome. Our first story today is in Mali, where the West Africa's bloc ECOWAS has closed borders and imposed extensive economic sanctions in response to delayed elections, which was initially set to hold in February. Now, while most ECOWAS member states have thrown their weight behind the sanctions, Guinea, Russia, and China have blocked UN's support for sanctions on Mali. Now, Mali's ruling junta has called for nationwide demonstration on Friday to protest the sanctions imposed over the poor delay. Let's take a look at this report. Mali's National Conference had recommended an extension of the tenure of the ruling junta by 5 years, a proposal which goes against an earlier pledge by the army rulers and attracted sanctions from the regional bloc ECOWAS, in which they had agreed to hand over power to civilians after presidential and legislative elections initially scheduled for February 2022. The 15-member bloc has now imposed further sanctions on Mali after its leaders submitted a proposed 4-year transition timetable on the eve of a high-stakes summit of West African nations.
First, the withdrawal of ambassadors of all ECOWAS member states in Mali. Second, closure of land and air border between ECOWAS member countries and Mali. Third, suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and Mali. The authority find the proposed chronogram for a transition totally unacceptable. This chronogram simply means that an illegitimate military transition government will take the Malian people hostage during the next 5 years.
Malians gather at the Martyrs Monument in Bamako, a symbol of the country's fight for democracy, to protest against the military regime which took over after a coup in August 2020 and May 2021, leading to the overthrow of President Boubacar Keïta.
Bonne chance entre eux et la CEDEAO, on ne va pas s'y mêler. Au contraire, c'est eux qui sont allés chercher la CEDEAO lorsqu'il y a eu la conférence nationale pour élaborer la charte. Ensuite, il y a eu un second coup d'État. Ils sont allés chercher la CEDEAO. Ils se sont engagés devant la CEDEAO. Donc, c'est à eux de respecter leurs paroles données à la CEDEAO.
In a swift reaction to the fresh and tougher sanctions, Mali's military government announced the closure of its land and air borders with ECOWAS nations and recalled its ambassadors from member states. It remains to be seen if the military leaders will agree to a civilian transition, just as the country continues to struggle with militancy in the north amid the political crisis. Niyi Omoni, News Central.
That was the report on the ongoing crisis in Mali, as well as the sanction imposed on the country by ECOWAS. Now, we understand that the pervasive continuation of the crisis in Mali has led to a lot of children going out of school, as well as an endless cycle of instability. Now, we'll be joined shortly to discuss this by our Liberian journalist, Anthony Stevens, who will help us dissect this issue and tell us more about it. You're welcome, Anthony Stevens. Anthony, can you hear me? All right, well, we'll wait for Anthony to join us. Niyi, we see what is going on in Mali. It's been a very tough one, especially for the citizens. I mean, you know, like they always say, when two elephants fight, the grasses suffer. Now, we know that there is a sanction that has been imposed, and it's a very, very tough, you know, measure against the country. We see that they've withdrawn their ambassadors, that's ECOWAS ambassadors. We see that they are closing land and air borders, and these are things that are going to affect the citizens in Mali.
It's real, sincerely, because you know, the juntas are just ruling apparently, but there are people there that are living in these countries, and these are sanctions that will affect food supply, to affect movement from one place to the other. Some might even lose their houses, lose their livelihood. Okay, so there's so much to still look out for. There's really so much to still look out for.
Okay, all right. I'm sure Anthony Stevens is with us right now. You're welcome, Anthony. Anthony, could you unmute your device?
I have. Are you hearing me now?
Loud and clear. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us on the show.
It's my pleasure. Happy New Year.
Okay, so Anthony, you have been following this report closely, and we were made to understand that Mali has described the sanctions that was imposed on them by ECOWAS as inhumane. But ECOWAS has not cancelled these sanctions. Instead, they keep coming up with stiffer measures, suspending most commerce and financial aid to the country, closing land and air borders, as we're just talking about, with other members of ECOWAS, and also activating the bloc's standby force. Now, what do you think is the reason for this, considering that the country has actually said that it is open for dialogue? So why is the sanction coming now?
Well, it's just known that we've heard the military junta expressing its willingness to wanting to dialogue. Initially, they had seemed to be looking. It seemed that they didn't want to go to elections, and ECOWAS has been very, very keen on insisting that there should be elections, that should be held, because the junta had initially said they were going to hold the elections in February, but then they came out to say because of growing insecurity, they wouldn't hold the elections. So ECOWAS thinks that they seem to be playing the game, the military junta. So they feel that the sanctions are the best options right now, the only alternatives that they can use to further pressurize the military junta.
But Anthony, you know, some people will say that these strict or tough measures were supposed to have come when the coup took place. So why is it coming now? I mean, the coup took place and it felt like the ECOWAS was quiet, but now these sanctions are being imposed. So why are they imposing sanctions now instead of when the coup took place?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Apparently, there were some signs that they were making progress, because you saw your former president, Goodluck Jonathan, in Mali on several occasions trying to mediate to resolve the political and military impasse that engulfed the country. So at that point, it seemed that they were making some progress, but from all indications, it looks like they aren't getting the result they want from the junta, and they feel that further sanctions can pressure them to go to elections. But it seems that we've seen from all the instances, a classic example, the situation in Guinea, where where ECOWAS also imposed further sanctions, but the military junta seems to be clinging onto power. They stay hitching onto power. They don't want to leave. The military leader there is running his own government. The ex-president Alpha Conde is still not in the position he should be in, even though ECOWAS and the EU condemned the military takeover, but the military is still in power in Guinea. So it looks like these sanctions are just feeble warnings for these military leaders. They seem to be not listening. They seem to be having the control of the country largely because that's the clearest indication they seem to have that people are listening to them, and the citizens can do exactly what they wanted to do. But yes, there's still insecurity.
Anthony, talking about people listening to them now, I want to of the words you just mentioned. Now, there seems to be a power play in these sanctions, in these sanctions by ECOWAS and so many other things. Now, let me quote this. French ambassadors accused Mali government of diverting public funds to pay for machineries from Russia. We understand that Guinea, Russia, and China have blocked UN support for sanctions on Mali to delay next month's election until 2026. That's about 4 to 6 years. Now, can we say the intervention of these two countries, because they are international power plays, they're important, will it see a change in the trajectory of things in Mali?
Well, maybe it could happen, maybe it may not happen. Don't forget that the Russians and the Americans have not always been on cool terms. We just been witnessing before our eyes what's happening in the Middle East. There have been several talks that have been held between American and Russian top diplomats, but those talks have not produced the desired results so far. The Russians want to have some grip on Africa. They've been supporting the military junta in Mali. Of course, they are one of the 5 key members of the UN Security Council. So they do have a key weight, they do have a key force, they do have a key decision to make. But I think in all this, it is the people of these two countries, Guinea and Mali, who are feeling the pinch, especially the economic pinch of all of what is going on. So whatever dialogue that needs to be done, because the junta has now said in Mali, for example, that they are open to the dialogue after they had initially said that they were recording the ambassadors and they themselves were closing our borders with ECOWAS member states. So they've realized that there are very, very huge consequences of such a decision. So they are open for dialogue. I think dialogue is the only way out. And ECOWAS has shown that it is a very powerful force, and they can be they can use the military wing, they can use their diplomatic wing, and they've been using their diplomatic wing to some extent. They did have some success, but it seemed that when the military junta was not giving into their request to hold the elections in February, as the junta had promised, then they got angry. Then they came off the tougher sanctions over the weekend. But of course, dialogue is the only way out, because it's just the ordinary people in these countries who are going to feel the pinch of such decisions.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so we move on to East Africa, in Uganda, where schools have reopened after almost 2 years, making it the world's longest closure of schools due to COVID-19 pandemic. Students and parents in Uganda are excited about the recent developments because children are once again enjoying one of the most important facets of their lives, which is, of course, education. However, the school disruption has devastating effect on both the students and the teachers, as some students could not return to school as a result of teenage pregnancy. And some teachers have not only lost their jobs, but also moved to other professions as a result of the lockdown. Now let's take a look at this report for more insight.
Children in Uganda are again enjoying one of the most important parts of their lives, education, after ending the world's longest school disruption due to the COVID-19 pandemic. For most students, it was a day of excitement as school reopened after almost 2 years.
I am happy because I was missing my teachers and my study.
Schools in Uganda have been closed since March 2020, shortly after the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed on the African continent. Some classes reopened in February last year, but shut down again 4 months later as the country faced a surge in infections. Educators say closing the school has had a devastating effect not only on the students, but the teachers.
Schools that are within the city or within the towns, some of them had the opportunity maybe to get some study materials. And they did something for some time, but when it is not well supervised still, you'll find that they might have studied, but not to the best of their ability. With the schools up country, some of them did not study anything completely. There are teachers in private schools that did not receive any pay completely, and others might have maybe abandoned even the profession. So now bridging up that gap still will take some time, and it needs some serious intervention by the government and other well-wishers.
Parents are also excited as they do their first school drop-off in almost 2 years, and many cannot hide their relief that the world's longest lockdown due to COVID-19 has ended.
We have taken 2 years without coming to school, but now I'm very happy to see my children coming back to get their, to see the children back and to get their friends. We have been missing them.
It is hoped that the government, educationists, parents and other stakeholders in Uganda will do all they can to bring back confidence following the longest closure of schools in the East African nation. Omolola Ololade reported for News Central.
As seen in the report, that is the longest school closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic in Uganda. And finally, schools have opened after 2 years. Now, we understand that affected almost 10 to 15 million children, and they had to stay at home. Now, that is really, devastating if you think about the children having to stay at home, not knowing when to resume. Right now, joining us on Report Desk Africa to discuss this further is a journalist from Uganda. His name is Nkalubo Hakim. Hello, Hakim. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure always being on News Central.
It's a pleasure to have you always. Now, Hakim, schools have been closed for 83 weeks now. And as a result of this, like I mentioned earlier, it has affected 10 to 15 million children, according to United Nations. Now, what would you say has been the implication of this for the country's education system?
Thank you very much. Right now, a number of reasons are actually causing a lot of panic within in the country, and it's cutting across on the side of the government and the government schools. Some teachers have actually shifted to other professionals, others have actually gone to Dubai. For private schools, it's a different case. Most of the schools have actually been sold off. Some have actually been taken over because of bank loans. These were actually being funded by bank loans, and these have actually been sold off. And then also there's at the other side of parents, being that they are coming from a lockdown. They have not been, most of the people have actually not been earning enough, so they don't have the funds to take the children back to school. And then there's also the other aspect of the students or the pupils in primary schools. Some of these had actually joined kind of the labor force, informal. Some are actually selling face masks. Some are actually selling polythene bags. Others are actually vending food. They've actually gone on some to do casual labor work, like working in mines, working in tax parks, such stuff like that. So you find that a number of reasons across all the different stakeholders affecting them. Some schools have actually the fact that no one was actually taking care of them, they were abandoned, they were dysfunctional. Some of the buildings and structures are down. So basically that's the environment we're in. In as much as people are trying to feel back to the normal way of life, for instance, like now, I'm still around the streets, but before at this time I would be home.
Now, Hakim, Uganda is one of the countries with the highest number of school children in Africa. And the school closure had far-reaching consequences for learning and, of course, put vulnerable students at risk, especially for the young teenagers who are female. Now, I understand that the Minister of Education, Janet Museveni, also doubles as the wife of the president, and she has been doing a lot. What will be the fate of these teenage mothers? About 23% of Uganda schoolgirls have gotten pregnant during this lockdown alone. Now, unlike Tanzania, who we know that at the time they placed a ban on teenage pregnant people coming back to school, which has been lifted now, Uganda don't have such rules. They can come back to school. But what will be the fate of these girls, these teenage girls, who have gotten pregnant, young ones at that matter, who have gotten pregnant at the course of the lockdown? What do you think would be their fate?
Thank you very much. One, let me tell you something. That at the time of the pandemic, when we went into the lockdown, I just concluded one of my research, and it was about perceptions of, the perceptions towards parent-adolescent communication related to sexual and reproductive health behaviors. So you find that in our culture here in Uganda, in as much as we have different cultures, but generally the culture of or the norm of talking to young children about sexual and reproductive health issues, it's something that people don't want to talk about, even when they see signs of their adult friend, let's say, engaging in sexual and reproductive health behaviors. So to go back to your question, the same applies even to the different schools. For someone to actually come back to school even after giving birth, they are already looked at as spoiled children. So the environment is really not good at all. We've had some activists coming on board to say, please, let's not chase away these young girls. This so happened because they were so idle, but the culture, generally, it's not rehabilitating. The culture is not convenient. Those who go back to school when they are pregnant or they have given birth, they are being shunned. And then also we have that same culture that believes, okay, you've gotten married. Whether someone who actually implemented you is there, if they want, they can take you, regardless of how they are taking you. Sometimes, if they don't even take you, you're going to stay with your kid or the baby you have given birth to, and then you're going to be home and everyone doesn't take you as, they already take you as someone who is evil. So it's really a very hard situation for the young adolescent girl who is in that situation. And as we speak, the number is really very, very big. I'm sure if you've had a report, just a moment.
All right.
If you heard about in Uganda, yesterday but one of the leaders in the Anglican church, one of the archbishops came out strongly and said that church schools are not going to welcome girls who have become pregnant in our school.
Right.
That was very open on air. Wow.
Okay,
yes, so that's the situation.
Hakeem, I'm so sorry for interrupting you, but because of our time, we'll not be able to go into details of that. But thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks a lot. Now, Niyi, talking about the reasons for, or the aftermath of, children staying at home for that long. Now, there's some reasons. One of them is that parents are looking for money, which is typical.
Of course.
Another one, just as we mentioned, is that teenagers are getting pregnant. Another reason is that these children are finding things to do and they've started earning money.
In fact,
so nobody wants to go back to school.
According to the research I did, about 1/3 of the pupils might not come back to school.
Exactly. I saw a report where a little boy, I can't remember his name now, but he said he's already, learning how to construct things, and he's no longer interested.
The question is, who is going to teach them? Now, there are some of these teachers that work with private schools that have not been paid for 83 weeks. Some of them have even left teaching.
Exactly.
They've gone to do other things. So it's a whole lot in the mix.
Right, and another fear of most of the parents is, okay, now we're coming back. We went on lockdown because there was COVID-19. Now we're coming back, but there's still Omicron, the Omicron variant.
Right.
So what is to say that it won't be a back and forth situation?
I also feel it's going to be, it's still going to be a little bit not balanced as against what the quality of education is back then, because there might still be staccato in terms of the teachers, in terms of the academics, in terms of the curriculum, and so many other things.
Right. I really can't imagine having, especially those little children,
2
having them
years?
at home for 2 years.
It's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. All right, so still to come on the program, World Youth Forum returns after 2 years due to COVID-19. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Report Desk Africa. Now, we move to the World Youth Forum, which has returned after 2 years' absence due to COVID-19 pandemic, and this time in Egypt. Now, the forum, which has become a platform for dialogue between young people and global decision makers to promote exchange of views on key global issues, aims to present implementable policy, recommendations and initiatives that, of course, will address the aspiration of young people, and people gather all over the world for this. Now, this report will give you more about what we're talking about.
Back together. It is both the theme of this year's World Youth Forum and a statement of defiance after a pandemic led to a brief pause of the annual global event. 2 years after a pandemic-induced pause, youth of the world reconvened at Sharm el-Sheikh to pick up where they left off. Encouraged by keynote addresses from the UN and President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the youths are prepared to step into the next chapter.
When we set up a call center in Cameroon, it was because we noticed there was none. And as a group of young people, we felt that we are always criticized for being troublemakers. And for us to change the narrative, we had to give the solution to it. And I think that's why our program was named by the state and UN agencies as the best COVID-19 response. And that earned us a recognition as UNESCO Real Life Hero.
I'm running a software engineering startup called eMentor Africa. And the purpose of the startup is to help students and young people to go to school without having to leave their homes.
I'm very specifically work for SDG. So I just try to find ideas out over there. And moreover, in my country, it's very much poverty-based country and it's developing very fast for economically. And if I get any type of opportunity to create an economical growth or economical connection with my country, that would be very better for me.
One of the keynote speakers of the forum, Isaac Boama, says there is no greater time for youths of the world to take charge of the future.
This whole idea of the World Youth Forum was birthed by a young person like me. And now when I look at the magnitude of impact it's making right now across the world, it tells me that no matter your location, who you are, your idea matters. And then when you take the step to want to implement it, it actually becomes something that everybody can benefit from.
Several participants also shared their expectations for the conference.
We are hoping that through this forum and other activities that we are going to be having, we can put more pressure and also advocate more that our government should have better sustainability policies in place for not just the next 10 years or the next 30 years, but for the next 100 years.
If I go back to UK or to Korea, I want to deliver the issue of gender as I studied it.
The youth carries everything, technology, innovation. It's the youth who are coming up with these brilliant ideas. So I believe if we empower the youth, if we give them the forum, the opportunity, the platform to develop these ideas, that is what is going to make our future better.
As the event progresses, it is expected that the policies from this year's conference will truly bring youths and the rest of the world back together. From Sharm el-Sheikh, Bernard Akede, News Central.
Interesting report right there on the World Youth Forum. We can see how enthusiastic the youths are to cause a change when they get back to their various countries. Now, from the very beginning of this forum, News Central has had presence in Sharm el-Sheikh, and I'm talking about our correspondent, Bernard Akede, who will be joining us right now to discuss the World Youth Forum, and of course, our senior producer, Bimbo Aboyele. Thank you very much for joining us, Bernard and Bimbo.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so Bernard, it's day 4 of the World Youth Forum. What would you say has been the major discourse for the past few days?
There have been so many discourses, if I can use that term. But I think the major discourse has been coming back from COVID-19 pandemic era, where almost the entire world was on lockdown. It's looking at the post-COVID world back together, like you clearly stated, is the the hook line for this year's forum. And clearly, it's not just the hook line; it's also a statement of affirmation that the whole world is back together. So COVID-19 first, I will pick, and then the power of the youth is another point that stands out, and then thirdly, I would also say. Like I said, there's so many to pick from. COVID-19, the power of the youth, climate change also was in forefront of conversation, and then there was science and technology. So those four, from all the youth we spoke to, I think those four particularly were hitting really, really hard amongst all the conversations that were had. And then, of course, you can't rule away the fact that this is Africa. Now, we're still rooting for girl-child education and then female inclusion when it comes to equality and equity for work, in the workplace, in sports, in everything in general. So you put all that together, plus so much more that was discussed, you have a full 4-day package of the 2022 session of the World Youth Forum.
Awesome. Now, Bimbo, this is to you. I can see that the weather actor is actually favorable. So, but away from that, now let's talk about the science and technology part, especially with the many innovations by young minds. Now, what have you encountered? What latest inventions should Africa look out for? Because I've been seeing some videos online, some robots, some electric bicycles. Just inform us. What should we look out for in Africa?
First of all, I liked the energy from the youth that we spoke to. I loved the camaraderie. There was this particular guy from Ethiopia. He was very, very jovial, very, very playful, wanted to hug everybody, was so proud of both the Ethiopian flag he was flying and of the flag of the African Union that he was carrying around. There was also quite... I also found it pleasing to see people from other continents associate with Africa. There was a Bangladeshi national who felt very African, and also an Asian lady, I think she's Korean. And I was most impressed by a particular Tunisian lady, very, very cerebral. She knew her onions, a diplomat and an activist since she was, I think, 12 or 13-year-old. And she said quite a number of things. And on the part of the startup companies that we witnessed as well, a lot of them are doing so, mind-blowing, mind-boggling things, in as well. So there is room for a lot of development, for a lot of improvement when it comes to innovation in Africa. Things that I personally didn't know were going on when it comes to innovation and development, like one of the startup companies that is doing something that has to do with online remote therapeutic and diagnostics or something of that sort. So there is a lot of Africa is a very fertile ground, and all you just need to do is to apply yourself. And it's so encouraging to see the youth of today ready to apply themselves. And with the World Youth Forum, it's a platform that I think every country should sponsor youth to attend, so that they will know that they are not in a bubble and that they will be challenged by what their peers in other countries are doing, so that they can aspire to do something along that line as well.
Right, that's really interesting.
Blessings, if you don't mind, I'd like to also lend my voice to what Bimbo just said.
Go ahead.
Two things that also stood out for me from science and technology. I just want to add to Bimbo. There was a young man from Jordan who said they were working on indoor farming, and this happened because of what COVID-19 happened, did to their business. So they couldn't farm outside. They just started a business few months before the lockdown, and then they had to morph into indoor farming, which is fantastic. But also interestingly, there was the American lady who talked about science and technology, and said she was surprised to hear the word the metaverse here in Africa. It's really, really new science and technology, taking science to another. The first time I heard the metaverse was in an Avengers movie. So to hear it here, it was really impressive. So yeah, just adding to what people said, truly, science and technology really is going far, and Africa is not lagging behind at all.
True. I mean, saying a few years ago, these are things that we didn't think were going to be realistic, but look at it now. And I noticed how genial youths of this generation are, and that's exactly the level of energy they put into their creativity, and that's amazing to see. Now, Bernard, we know that, or we understand that this year's edition had 18,000 participants and 500 speakers. Wow. Now, the World Youth Forum could not hold for 2 years because of COVID-19, obviously. Can you share with our viewers some of the practical solutions recommended in the course of a forum for major issues, especially like climate change and COVID-19? These are issues that have been dragging for so long. So what are the major recommendations from the forum?
Start with climate change. Now, it was quite interesting to realize that a lot of young people in Africa actually are taking climate change very, very seriously. While I was interviewing one of the youngsters, I said it is almost obvious that the rest of the world is going, well, particularly the Western world, is doing a lot about climate change and global warming, but it seems like Africa is not. And this chap responded saying that's not true, that's the rhetoric that is going around. African countries are actually doing a lot concerning climate change, but the rest of the world is not announcing it as audible as they announce their own. And that made me really proud to be an African and to be working with some of these young people. Well, I believe I can call myself a young person anyway. And so, it's really quite interesting to see that there's a lot being done about climate change. There's some people who have talked about planting of trees in their home cities, in their countries, just to reduce the effect of global warming. And that is happening in so many African countries. Sadly, it's not being announced as much as it should. Also, talking about COVID-19, clearly the effect of COVID-19 was so global that everybody felt it. So now different countries are looking towards remote work. Several years ago, what we are doing right now, Bimbo and I talking from Egypt via our mobile phones, and you guys in the studio, they're listening to us, would probably have been extremely difficult, probably without an OB van, or maybe even impossible. But things like this are happening, and the youths actually talked about that it's making work easy for them. Someone can be Ghanaian or Ugandan or Ethiopian and be working for an American company. That's
awesome. That's awesome, Ben. Let me just quickly, because we don't have much time. Let me just quickly wrap this up and get Bimbo's view. Bimbo, speaking on unemployment, where Ben just mentioned, now there are a lot of creativity coming out of Africa and for Africans apparently, and we know that the rate of unemployment in this part of the continent is growing, and this might be a way to eradicate poverty and of course reduce unemployment. Do you see any of these creativity or these innovations bringing Africa out of poverty?
Yeah, most definitely. There were quite a number of World Youth Forum laboratories, and some of the innovations on display at those laboratories. When you are in a bubble, sometimes you don't know what is happening. Just like Bernard mentioned earlier, about climate change and some of the misconceptions about climate change. Which I think I should just add this to it, that Africa is one of the lowest emitters in climate change, but we are worse. We are worse off because we are in the equator. So when the Earth warms up, the heat intensifies there in the equator, and then it worsens the desertification, especially in the Sahel. So while the likes of China are emitting and making the world warmer, the Chinese will not be the first to feel it. Sure. Africa will be the worst hit from it. But let's come back to employment.
Apologies, Bimbo, because of our time, we won't be able to go deep into that. But it's really interesting. I would have loved to know. But anyway, thank you very much, Bimbo and Bernard, for joining us. And I hope beyond the World Youth Forum, you both plan to go sightseeing or skydiving or something.
It's been good. Not too hard. We've not been able to do that.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks a lot for joining us. All right, these are the major stories we can take for today because of our time. And don't go nowhere, because when we come back, we'll be looking into our crystal ball and be telling you some of the stories that might likely make headlines in the coming weeks. Stay tuned.
Okay, looking at the crystal ball, federal government of Nigeria have lifted the ban on Twitter after 222 days. Now, this comes as they've come to agreement that between Twitter and the federal government, Nigerians can now use Twitter without VPN. Mixed feelings have, however, continued to trail this development. We will recall that this comes a week before the day ECOWAS court set to deliver judgments in the consolidated lawsuit filed by Paradigm Initiative, Serap Nigeria, Media Rights Aid Agenda, and EIE Nigeria, amongst many. Now, this you should look out for. And of course, aftermath of ECOWAS sanctions is still ongoing. The junta has called for protest, national protest from the people to join in, and it's almost looking as they are going to be the victim now. And of course, the last one will be Ethiopia-Tigray clash, and we'll be telling you and giving you more information about that. There's been a blockage of medical aids, and so many other things have not been allowed to come into the country. Now, these are the stories we're looking out for that can make the headlines in the coming weeks.
I'm particularly excited about the Twitter. At least now we can use Twitter.
So those of you that have been using VPN, it's illegal.
All right, that's all we can take on Report Desk Africa for today. I hope it's been as insightful for you as it has been for us. Yeah. And we'll be joining you again, or you'll be joining us again, whichever way, next week as we bring you more insights into more stories. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Blessings Mosugu.
And I am Niyi Omoni.